Over in the UK last night, there was a big heavyweight event all around, I guess. Headlined, of course, by Anthony Joshua versus Robert Helenius, a late replacement for Dillian White, who unfortunately failed a drug test earlier on in the week. So it was a pretty last minute substitution, about the best that we could have wished for, and the event continued. I've not seen this. Unfortunately, I was away last night. I've not seen any of the boxing action, so you two boys have got to carry me through. I did see the stoppage. I saw the great shot that Joshua eventually threw and put Elenius out of there. Josh, give us your verdict on that display last night from Anthony Joshua, mate.
Well, if you haven't seen it, I think you'd be fine watching the highlights. That's what I think is the case. Probably for all of the heavyweight fights, highlights would suffice. I think you'll be fine.
Okay,
But
okay.
as it relates to Joshua versus Helenius, coming into this, I had stated that Joshua he had to get the knockout. I felt he was going to get a knockout, and I felt it was going to come at some point early. Now, I thought it would be a little bit earlier than when it came, which ended up being the seventh round. But nonetheless, he was able to get the knockout, and he really touched Helenius with that right hand. And it shows that Joshua does have some pop in his punches. That being said, of course, Helenius, he's at that stage right now where if you have a young fighter, or at least a younger fighter who has some pop in there, then it's always going to be dangerous for him, just given his age, kind of where he's at in his career and all. So Joshua, of course, we saw the boxing version of him, where he took his time, trying to work behind the jab. Not a lot of urgency to go after Helenius there early on, but maybe that was the game plan. We compared with Deontay Wilder, who went in and pretty much sparked Helenius in the first round. For Joshua, he actually took some shots as well. He had a little bit of swelling, some bleeding. That being said, he got the job done. Now, he's still, I guess, feeling himself out there working with Derek James. And I think it'll take another fight, maybe two, before he's probably fully gelled with Derek James. That being said, he doesn't really have another fighter to really kind of just learn the things, because they're talking Deontay Wilder next. And if that's the case, you might have seen my tweet last night where I said I don't think it goes beyond 2 rounds, and I don't see Anthony Joshua winning. Now, a few years back, I did have Anthony Joshua winning had he fought Deontay Wilder, more like 5 years back, I guess you could say, somewhere in that 2019 time frame, when Joshua had his full confidence as far as, he was coming in, he was the man, he was the top heavyweight in boxing as far as the draw was concerned, and many people were backing him and standing with him as we moved forward. At this point, though, there's just something about Joshua, just in seeing him, and maybe it's the mental aspect, but I don't feel like it's that same confident Joshua that we had previously saw. Now, that could be just me reading into it a bit much, but I've also seen a lot of other people commenting on such, some of them being boxers themselves, pundits, etc., media members. So I think there's some validity to it. As mentioned, he did what he had to do against Helenius. It was not an over the top performance. It was a nice knockout, but outside of that, wasn't necessarily one of those fights where, okay, yeah, I'd be clamoring to go back and watch it or anything of that nature. I think the knockout in itself will live on, just like Wilder's knockout of Helenius will live on. But overall, for Joshua, he just did what he had to do, I will say, and it took him a little while to get there. So I think there's more work that Joshua will have to put in. I don't know if he's, well, I would say that it's going to be tough for him to regain the titles unless they're stripped or somehow vacated and they're all over the place once again. But to think about him going in defeating Usyk or Fury, I don't see that. So he's in an interesting spot. But maybe he comes through. There have been fighters who have been in pretty sort of un almost unfathomable, unbeatable situations, I guess you could say. But they somehow claw their way out of them, and maybe Joshua can claw his way out of kind of this phase of his career and get back to that guy who everyone was viewing as the future of the heavyweight division in some sense. And he's still a big time draw, so he will be here for sure. It'll just be interesting to see what he's able to do as far as title contention is concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, so to echo, some things that you were saying there, Josh, a lot of people have, and they've said it not just from last night, but kind of over the years, especially since the Ruiz fight, pretty much that AJ's kind of gone a little bit. I don't know whether scared is the right word, but he just doesn't seem to have that instinct of getting the knockouts that he used to do. And he seemed a little bit fearful of getting hit a bit more, and maybe that's what leads to these less than exciting rounds until he eventually, usually finds a knockout eventually. Alex, what did you make of the performance last night?
Everyone wanted a knockout, and that's what we got, a seventh round knockout. It was a slow start to it. You could like Josh had mentioned earlier, that obviously there's some things he's still working out. Trying to get more comfortable with what James is asking him to do, and going through it, you're watching, and it wasn't sizzling performance. It wasn't dominant that many people may have wanted and or expected. However, something Josh said that really stuck out: the knockout. That's what really matters. It was a beautiful knockout, and I think it does have to do with that mentality, right? Beforehand, Tony Bellew said it really well. 10-0 Joshua, 12-0 Joshua. Joshua after Dillian White probably gets Helenius out of there in 2 rounds. This one, however, he wants to, be more cerebral. He wants to really, he's trying to become a master boxer. And, it always sounds good, but it's so much harder to do. So basically, we've seen him try to work out those kinks. He got hit by a lot of hard jabs. You got to give Helenius credit for that. He does have a hard, stiff jab. However, it was obvious. The more Helenius opened up, the closer we're going to get to the knockout. And I feel like that's what happened. Helenius got a little more comfortable. He kept throwing that jab, the jab out, now bringing his hand back up. And AJ knew this since round 2. I think that's what is probably most bothersome. He talked about it. He said, he leans back. He's leaning straight back. So that's why he kept throwing that right hand. And right before the 7th round, I think Derek James just said, finally got through to him. He said, trust the jab. You have to fucking jab, You use the jab, throw the right hand behind it. Commit. He said, throw that jab to his chest. So what did he do? It was beautiful if you really look at it. He jabs to Helenius' right hand to keep it at home. Then jabs like the midsection, between the stomach and the chest. And then unleashes this huge bomb. And we get that highlight reel knockout that is always going to be shown when it comes to an AJ highlight tape. So, at the end of the day, the result is what matters. We get a 1-punch KO. And there's one fight we want, right? Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua. We thought we were going to get this many years ago, and we're getting it now for no belts, most likely. And there's a possible undisputed fight, and this is bigger than that. I think this has become the biggest fight in boxing, I would say. So I'm excited. I just hope they get everything signed on the dotted line, and let's get ready to rumble.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I kind of put it out there before. This is probably come, when I say this, I mean Joshua versus Wilder. We believe it is going to be the next fight. That's what all the noises are being made are about, and I think even though it has come 4, maybe even 5 years too late, when they were both undefeated, they were both the biggest punchers in the game. They both had all the titles. It would have been an absolutely huge mega fight, an explosive one. It's still that huge explosive fight, just possibly a little bit less prestigious than it possibly could have been those years ago. But yeah, it's definitely a fight that every boxing fan wants to see. There's just these 2 huge punches in there, in a case of who lands first. Obviously, last night was kind of the benchmark for Joshua compared to how Wilder handled Helenius. Obviously, it took him a good while longer. And then off the back of that, everyone's going to obviously compare and have their own take on who's going to win. And a lot of people are mentioning Joshua's overcautious, overthinking things mentality that he seems to have, which is what you just both alluded to. And I guess maybe that's what's happening now. He's overthinking it too much, trying to be this new style of box that you suggested, Alex. And if he just goes more on his instincts like he did in his younger days, maybe he wouldn't be having as much trouble, and he'd just be able to bang out people a bit quicker and whatever. But alas, we got the result that we needed last night, a spectacular KO win. It sets up the Wilder match perfectly. Josh said this just there earlier that he's got reservations that Joshua is possibly ready for that. He might need a bit more tweaking and whatever, but it sounds like that's going to be the next match. So let's just get it on. Hopefully there's no hurdles, and we're going to get that huge heavyweight fight that's going to keep the heavyweight division burning.